How you doing, travelers? Ed Schneider bringing you this new YouTube video. I got some bad news today. I'm making it kind of formal, but let's have some fun in the memory of my first instructor and good friend, Richard Thurman. The last I heard from Rich, I looked in my book, was April 11th, my birthday of last year, and he texted me that he wanted me to, that he was, if I was interested in buying any of his traps, and I responded. I says, that's a good idea, but I says, I was going to send the same message to you. I didn't know at the time that Rich Thurman had cancer. I don't know exactly the type of cancer, but he died June 6th, according to the obituary. Rich was my first instructor, a good friend of mine. We met kind of in a way that he didn't want to, I get nothing against me, but he didn't want to meet me. He didn't really want to do this. But I was a fishing guide captain for a while on the Missouri River, and I used to take a couple of outdoorsmen from Mequon, Illinois, that were good friends with Rich. And they said, hey, you got to go with this guy. He kept telling Rich, you got to go, this guy, and you and him will get along well. So Rich quoted me a price, I believe, of $400 for 2 days of instruction. And he jokingly said, you know, I thought the price was so high you wouldn't take me up on it. And I did. And I'm glad I did. Rich, to me, was the man who opened up the door to coyote trapping. Something that I have not been able to obtain on my own prior to that, other than a chance catch here and there. But Rich, after instruction with Rich, I started connecting on coyotes. When I was with Rich, he kept talking about a guy named Craig O'Gorman and how Craig was just all of that. And he gave me one of his catalogs of Craig's, and he says, you can learn a lot just from reading the catalogs, his catalog. And so I enjoyed it. But he talked about Craig O'Gorman so much that I took instruction from Craig as well. Now, there's a photo that Rich gave me of him and Craig O'Gorman back in the 70s. And it looks like a 70s photo if you see it. Good times. And I remember when I was first struggling as a bait and lure maker, and Thurman looked right at me one day on my trapping. We were trapping together. He looked right at me one day and he says, Schneider, I remember when O'Gorman was a nobody and nobody knew who he was. And then Craig subsequently kind of shared the same information when Bill Nelson passed away, and Craig started given instruction with some of Bill Nelson's students that they'd already signed up. Mrs. Nelson was in a bind when Bill died, and a lot of trappers already paid, and as a booby prize, they had to take instruction from Craig, one of Bill Nelson's solid students. And as Craig says, well, who would want to take instruction from me when you booked it with Bill? So it's funny how the world kind of goes around. I've given thousands of instructions between since the days that I was with Richard Thurman and Craig O'Gorman. The memory of Rich Thurman will always burn deep inside of me. And I called 2 other individuals right afterward because I kind of consider it the glory days of when I first met Rich. And I know I'm a little different than a lot of people. I think he was always proud of the direction I took with the instruction, that I took it serious, because he's given out several people's instruction, and he said, you know, no one's gone quite as crazy with it as what I did. And it's just kind of how I'm built. All right. So through association and through friendship, like a lot of students, after you take the instruction, you kind of drop the ball. I mean, you just drop and people go on their own way. Well, I didn't with Craig or with Rich. I continued visiting with him, talking to him, asking him questions, things like that. And Rich was nice enough to answer the phone, although he didn't need to, but he was nice enough to answer the phone. And I got me a piece of pretty good trapping ground in central Missouri, and Rich came with me for a week to trap. And we really had a lot of fun on that trip. I'll save the main story till later, but I do remember one of our better days was 3 bobcats in a single day. So Rich stayed with me about a week, and we had some good trapping. He was out of McQuan, Illinois at the time, and later on, he moved to Freeman, Missouri, to be closer to his daughter and grandchild. Rich and I went on to trap on a vacation trapping trip while I lived in central Missouri. We decided we'd try to go out there to Wyoming. And we went up around Casey, Wyoming. It was just, there was a lot of government ground around that general area. And we thought we could maybe just trap on the BLM ground. Well, we kind of struggle with that because a lot of the BLM ground actually has 10, 20 feet or 10 yards of land that's privately owned. So you can't, where we were at, you couldn't get from the road to the BLM ground because it was privately owned. I hope you understand that. So it was a thing that we were kind of struggling with. And all of a sudden one day, the day we were out trying to find ground to trap, Rich and I found these 2 fellas, and they were actually loading out calves, and that kind of having a hard time at it. They're older than I am right now, and so Rich offered our services, and we jumped in there, and I became the little Mary behind the calves, and steers and heifers, and they're 400-pound weanlings, and so anyway, I'm behind there and pushing and yicking and hawing and moving on, and we get them loaded. And they gave us permission to trap their ground. It was a wonderful experience. We had a ball. For 2 days, we set traps out and connected a nice red fox right away. And that was exciting. It was going after coyotes, ending up with this nice, beautiful fox and skinning it on the back end of Rich's truck, and felt like a professional trapper there for that time. Long lining on the road. That was my first attempt at it. And I couldn't have done it with a better person than Rich. But we were we were setting these traps in 63, 65 degree temperatures, and the ground was not frozen. It was perfect. But if you ever been to Wyoming, their secondary roads are not gravel, a lot of them, at least not where we were at. They're a dirt road. Well, after we got 2 days of setting in, that into the second day, a front moved through, and like a lot of forecasts out west, you can't trust them. Well, the front came through. Unfortunately, the ground was not frozen yet. And so we got all this rain, and then it went over to about 12 inches of snow. Well, we couldn't get on top of that ground. It was just mud underneath. So you got snow on top of a muddy road. So we went there about 3 days, kind of hemmed into the place we were renting at the motel, and we looked at the forecast. The low was going to be 17 degrees at 4 in the morning. Rich and I said, let's do it. Maybe it'll crust enough for us to get on top. And this is about 3 days, like I said, 3 days have gone by. We get out there and we're pulling traps as fast as we can. And I never will forget, we were starting to get up. We were doing good. it doesn't take too long to get around, but we were doing pretty good. I never will forget about the time about 9 o'clock hit, and we were just about done, and that sun had warmed everything up, and we were no longer kind of riding on top of the ground, but we were starting to sink in, and Rich's white pickup, and he looked at me as we're starting to bear. He says, Schneider, I'll kick your ass when you get stuck here. Because I think it's just for me pushing him to go on to the next one. But anyway, we ended up getting those traps. We didn't get stuck. We went and said our goodbyes to the owners that day and had some laughs, and they were really nice and said they were concerned about us. But we got our traps and caught some fur. Caught that fox. I even did a story for it in Fur Fish and Game, and I think that came out September of 2010, but don't hold me to that. I call it my $1,000 fox, because that's about what the trip cost me for that catch. So then later on, Rich came on when I moved to Kansas, he came on my Kansas trap line. And we got into some big pastures, and we went about 2 weeks, had a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment. About the time I was kind of going through a divorce and all that, but nonetheless, the divorce went on through, but the friendship maintained. And later on in life, Rich became one of my instructors when I started doing canine mastery. So I had a lot of fun having Rich aboard, and he enjoyed getting paid by me. I mean, I'm only laughing about it. But he was, if you ever knew Rich Thurman, you would know his infectious laugh. You would know that he had some of the greatest stories. In my book, he is one of our American heroes, serving us in the Vietnam War in the Navy. One of his jobs in the Navy was to go and do soundings. I forget, off the coast of Cambodia, I believe, but don't hold me to that. And he would, every time they got close to shore, of course, the shots would start ringing out and all that. And I mean, what a life. What an experience. You know, when you're 19 years old, I guess you're bulletproof, right? So that was to hear his stories there. And then he ended up coming back in and became Chief Master Sergeant there again in the Army. After he came back and had a little stint working for Gates Belts there in Galesburg, Illinois, and he ended up going back into the military. Military suited him and everything. But you know, the times I seen Rich discuss the more personal side, and if his wife ever saw this, he was breaking down in front of me when he didn't realize his wife had made some diaries of her daily life. And anyway, while he was away, I'll just say that she had wrote in her diary at one time about having no money left till the next money come in, but they were basically making do with a potato or something like that. And Rich broke down and felt so bad that, and so grateful to have such a wonderful wife that would endure such miseries of life, as it turned out. But she did. And he really was in love with his wife. I know that for a fact. Now, I had it in discussing with Rich something about legacies and this and that, and Bill Nelson's legacy and Craig O'Gorman's legacy and many other good trappers' legacies and things along that line. Rich took his legacy as, you know what, within a couple years, we're dead, we're forgotten. Don't put a lot of effort into legacies. And I want to just say this is that Rich Thurman can't say that about himself, even though he doesn't believe it. He can't say that about himself, because I know for a fact that he has left an immense hole in my life and a few others over his legacy that he left. And for all these thousands of trappers who have taken instruction from me, even more thousands of trappers who've watched me on YouTube. And just to give an example of one of my videos, I think it's my coyote fur handling video. There's 125,000 views on just that one, and climbing, or more. Maybe it's up to 140,000. Doesn't make any difference, but that's because of a guy like Richard Thurman. He brought something into my life that hopefully you can share in yours. And if I find videos, I just did one, I'm going to try to put a link on here of where you can listen to Rich Thurman give a discussion at my Canine Mastery. He was a wonderful, wonderful instructor. He was sincere when he talked to you. He was funnier than the devil when he was so funny when he wanted to tell a story. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end this tribute to my good friend Richard Thurman. And anyone, please say prayers to Rich to help his soul go into the narrow gates of heaven. I think anything we can all do to help a trapper, even when he's no longer on this earth, will be good. But I'm going to go ahead. This is my special whiskey that if trappers who just came with out of Kansas, it's for special occasions, my Kansas whiskey. So here's the story that I was going through the divorce, and I was going through my divorce, and I have to laugh over the fact that one night Rich and I, well, I'll just put it this way. We tied a good one on. We had such a good time. We actually went out to eat dinner that night, came back to the house, and had a couple beers working in the fur shed, and then the couple beers went into a couple more beers. And we went through quite a few drinks. So anyway, my ex-wife returned back home that day and the following day, and she looked at Rich and she says, "Did he drink too much?" And she was all mad and angry. And Rich, not wanting to be in the middle of something like this, and who would blame him, but Rich goes and says, well, about midnight, Schneider goes and says, "How about one more?" And I looked at him and I said, "Okay." So anyway, to Rich Thurman, one more to take you down the road. I sure love you, buddy. Woo. You're a good friend, and you'll always be remembered. And and for a man who didn't think he left a legacy at all, he did. So hope you guys can appreciate the things that I've been able to teach and share. It's because of a guy like Rich Thurman who took the time to share them with me. God bless everybody, and tight chains.